this is Dead Hamster, and today we're going to be taking a look at a new theory that has been created by Triclon and Rain in the Overcart 64 Discord. This theory is called hot swapping, and the idea is that while loading courses for Mario Kart 64, to switch and load in arbitrary course data so that we can load multiple courses into the Mario Kart ROM. Now, the thinking behind this is it's actually very difficult to create courses for multiple levels in Mario Kart 64. There are 16 courses in the standard Grand Prix or Versus mode, as well as 4 battle courses to make a total of 20. Between these 20 courses, they all do have the same segment structure, where segment 4 is vert data, segment 6 is F3D and object data, segment 7 is course data, and segment 9 is texture lists. However, the position of the relevant data in those segments is not the same between any of these courses. Additionally, some of these courses have additional objects or special programming that is dependent on the course ID that is selected. For example, in Toad's Turnpike, the cars; in Calamari Desert, the train. Any special objects or any special events that are taking place on the courses are running on the game's code itself and are not dependent on the course's actual data for its geometry. For that reason, it is very difficult to make a course, for example, Calamari Desert, because you have to go through the effort of also removing the train from the game and to make sure that it's not running on each frame. As such, you can't really use the same data for one course as for another, and also it means that you have to find the instructions for each course individually. So going into more detail on that, we'll look at, for example, how Mario's Raceway has everything structured out. When the game begins to run its course selection, a user would go to Mario's Raceway and select and hit OK. At this point, the game is running a load instruction that goes to the course header table. This is a section of data located in the ROM, which I've represented by this large blue rectangle here. And the course header table contains offsets for each of the courses in the game based on the course ID that it has been, that you're looking for. So Mario's Raceway would have the offsets to segment 6, segment 4, and 7, segment 9, and some memory addresses as to where to load those in. Those segments always contain specific data. For example, segment 4 will always contain the tracks, the course's verts. Segment 6 will contain F3D commands for special objects, such as the train or the cars in Toad's Turnpike, as well as the AI paths and the item lists, which are the item boxes, as well as trees and cactuses and the piranha plants and other such objects. The 3D positions for those will be stored in segment 6. Additionally, for any of those custom objects like trees and piranha plants, the vertices and textures and display list for drawing the geometry will all be located in segment 6. Segment 7 will be a truncated version of F3D that will only be the course geometry drawn from the verts in segment 4. And then finally, segment 9 contains the texture list as well as the master display list. The actual segments are structured out like so. Segment 6 begins with the display lists for the course for each section view. These point to the actual objects that are drawn in segment 7. Following that are the special objects. These would be the vertices and faces, or rather display lists for the piranha plants and trees and other such objects, as well as the textures and verts for those objects will all be located here. The course paths and item lists follow that. Again, those are the AI paths, and then the item boxes and the locations of the trees and the piranha plants and those such things. And then finally the surface map, or the collision for the course itself. Now the positions for these are different for each of the courses. Additionally, the locations for them are different for each of the courses. In some courses, the master display list might actually be in segment 6, or the surface map might actually be in segment 9. Again, there is no generic structure or format that is determinate across all 16 courses. Rather, when the course is loading and the instructions are running to go to the course header and load the segments from the relevant offsets, there are then further instructions following those dependent on the course ID that give you the relevant offsets for all the objects located within. Now the issue we're having is that there are 16 courses. There are 6 or 7 different relevant offsets for each one, as well as several objects that are written again by the assembly itself. For example, in Mario's Raceway, the green pipe that you drive through, as well as the audience stand located at the starting line, are both drawn instead of by the display lists located in the segment, are referenced in the assembly routines. Now, the displays are still here in segment 6 at a very specific offset in segment 6, but that offset is set in the actual game's code. So in order to make a custom level, you have to find all of these custom objects that are being drawn by the game's code and either erase them or move them somewhere else so that the game doesn't try to load arbitrary data and crash. You have to re-reference all of the important data, such as the surface map and the texture lists and the master display list and all of these. You have to change the offsets in the assembly routine that is loading that specific course. And then you have to change the course header table to reference where these new segments are written in the ROM image itself. This is quite a task, specifically for someone like myself who is completely unfamiliar with the MIPS assembly language as well as debugging programs or games in general. I have a basic understanding of how the assembly language works, and if I'm presented with some of it, I can read through it and understand what it's doing, but I cannot figure out for the life of me where these instructions start or how to find them or how to follow through backwards, so to speak. And for that reason, I've only been able to use the notes from Micro 500, who has listed out these assembly routines. As such, I've been able to make the adjustments I need. However, to find them for the other 15 Grand Prix courses is quite a monumental task, which is why the idea for hot swapping has come in. Since we do have Mario's Raceway figured out, the idea is that when a user would go to load a course, instead of jumping to the standard course loading routine where it goes to the course header table and loads the segments and everything else, instead we would write our own routine and jump to that instead. The hot swap routine would read the current course ID. For example, if it was set to Toad's Turnpike, let's say this is course ID of 12, it would read that we have selected Toad's Okay, we're going to close this. It would say that you had selected Toad's Turnpike, and then it would instead, I'm sorry, I had thrown off there. It would see that you had selected Toad's Turnpike, which has an ID of 12. It would jump to a custom table we had written that would contain offsets to all of the segment data for a custom course that we wanted to load instead of Toad's Turnpike. This course would be structured after Mario's Raceway. What we would do is set the ID to 1. We would go to Mario's Raceway and change all of these offsets in the header table to the offsets to our specific segment data that we wanted to load. So we could write 10 or 15 versions of Mario's Raceway, and then instead of loading Toad's Turnpike, we would load Mario's Raceway version 7 and put the relevant section offsets into the course header table. After putting those sections in, we would also have to edit some of the assembly routines that would later be determining where in those segments the various data was loaded. Since each course is going to be different in size, there is no one size fits all structure we can use to store all of the data. However, we can reposition some of these things to make editing some of the assembly routines a little bit easier. Some of the things we can do, the display lists are all referenced by the master display list. As such, it's better not to put them at the start of the data, rather put them at the end. For the texture lists as well, this is something that has an undefinite size, so it's probably something better to put near the end of the information. The surface map doesn't have to be located in segment 6. It can just as easily be located in segment 9. The surface map and master display list are both a determinate size. They're based on how many sections are located in the course. Most courses are divided up to 15 to 20 sections or so. Mario's Raceway has 17 sections. So if we limited this to, say, 32, that would cover just about every course that you could conceivably create, and also allow us to put a finite size onto the length of the master display list and surface map. So we would assume that the master display list is 32 sections long, which would allow us to place the surface map at an exact point as well. At that, we only need to relocate the texture list on the fly. The surface map and the master display list, we can edit those instructions one time and share the same offsets between all of the HotSwap courses, so that we don't have to change those every time that we load a new course. Additionally, in segment 6, because the special objects will always be the same size and the same location, the trees and the piranha plants are always going to have the same textures and vertices, etc. It's easier to place those first, so that the ASM routine, again, only has to be edited once. At that point, the course paths and item lists can be written, followed by, finally, the display list for the course, which can be of any size and length, because they are all referenced by the master display list down here. So by restructuring the data and changing how the assembly looks for it, for all of the HotSwap courses, we can lighten the load, so to speak, and make it so there's a few less instructions that we have to switch on the fly. So again, the theory is that we would read the course ID that the user has selected, when we hijack this assembly, the course loading routines, we would then re-point or rewrite all the pointers to the segments. We would change a few assembly routines that lead to relevant data in those segments, and then we jump back to the original course loading routine after setting the course ID to 1. So now the game comes in and tries to load a course. It thinks that it's loading Mario's Raceway. It jumps to the header table that we have just made adjustments to, and it then follows the new, or rather the edited assembly routine to load Mario's Raceway with the data located at the HotSwap locations. This allows us to create 16 clones of Mario's Raceway with slight variations to where the data is located, and only edit one assembly routine for loading the courses. Basically, instead of having to find and change 16 different assembly routines depending on which course you wanted to replace, we only have to use the one that we already have figured out, which is Mario's Raceway. The reason this is so exciting, again, is because I myself am not too familiar with debugging programs and figuring out how the MIPS assembly language works. When I read through it, I have no problem following through and figuring out what's being done, but trying to work backwards and determining where these commands are being loaded from has proven to be a bit of a difficulty. As such, if you're somebody who is familiar with debugging Nintendo 64 games or debugging video games in general, and you think you might be able to assist in providing help in the HotSwap theory or in anything in general regarding Mario Kart 64 modding, please use the Discord link below and join our Discord server for Overkart 64. We would love to have some assistance in modding this game and opening it up for the future. Additionally, if you want to just follow along as to the progress of Mario Kart 64 modding as new things are discovered, feel free to join as well. You don't need to chat or contribute. You can just be a viewer of all the content and things that are coming out for the game. It's a very exciting time for Mario Kart 64. A lot of new things are being discovered and being created, and we're happy to have everybody that wants to be a part of it. As such, thank you so much for choosing to watch the video today and sit through this, and really appreciate you taking the time to spend today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and take care.